She's just a family leech. My father said that at Thanksgiving while 14 people laughed and passed the mashed potatoes. Uncle Tom had been making that joke for 2 years, ever since he took out $38,000 in loans using my name, my credit, and medical paperwork I never signed. And every single person at that table had laughed with him. I didn't argue. I reached into my bag, pulled out a thick yellow envelope, and set it next to the turkey. My aunt's fork hit her plate. My father's laugh stopped. Uncle Tom pushed back his chair before he'd finished reading the first page. The envelope held a police report. His name was on every line. When the 2 oldest men at that table finished reading, they left without their coats. 3 others stopped returning his calls. And the one thing Uncle Tom had spent 2 years protecting, the version of this story where I was the problem, was gone before the dishes were cleared. Before I go on, take a moment to like and subscribe, but only if this story speaks to you. Drop your location and local time in the comments. Now let me take you back to the night Uncle Tom slid a document across a hospital table, looked me in the eye and said, "Sign it. Nobody will ever know." 2 years ago, I didn't care about credit scores or bank statements. I cared about breathing. I was 24, and my appendix had ruptured 3 days after a promotion I'd worked 60-hour weeks to earn. By the time I hit the ER, I was septic. The world had shrunk to the size of a hospital gown and the rhythmic, hollow hiss of an oxygen machine. My father, Richard, was the one who called the shots. He'd spent 30 years as a site foreman, a man who believed every problem could be solved with a loud voice and a chain of command. In our family, Uncle Tom was the top of that chain. Tom was the success. He owned a regional trucking fleet, wore Italian loafers to Sunday brunch, and talked about liquidity while the rest of us talked about grocery coupons. "Tom's handling the logistics, Grace," my father told me while I was still in the ICU. He didn't touch my hand. He stood at the foot of the bed, arms crossed, checking his watch. "He knows the insurance people. He's looking at the paperwork so you don't have to." My mother, Denise, sat in the corner chair, her back to the window. She was folding and unfolding a paper napkin until it turned into a gray, linty ball. She didn't look at me. She looked at the linoleum. That was her role, the silent witness who made sure everyone's water glass was full while the men decided how the world worked. I was too groggy to argue. The morphine made the room feel like it was underwater. The third night, the heavy hitters were in the cafeteria. The hallway was quiet, just the squeak of a nurse's cart somewhere in the distance. Uncle Tom walked in alone. He didn't bring flowers. He brought a tablet and a slim leather folder. "Hey, kiddo," he said. He smelled like expensive tobacco and peppermint. He sat on the edge of my bed, a move that sent a sharp, white-hot spike of pain through my abdomen. He didn't notice. "You look like hell. Let's get this administrative garbage out of the way so you can sleep." He slid a digital document across the rolling table. It was long, filled with tiny blocks of text and Section 4 headers. "What is it?" I whispered. My throat felt like I'd swallowed glass. "Just the medical power of attorney and some bridge gap billing forms," Tom said. His voice was smooth, the same one he used to convince my dad to invest his entire 401k into a guaranteed real estate flip 5 years ago. "The hospital is being a pain about the out-of-network stuff. Sign here. Nobody will ever know we even had to deal with this." I stared at the blue line. My vision was doubling. I knew enough to know I shouldn't sign anything I couldn't read, even if it was family, especially if it was family. "I can't," I said, pushing the tablet away. "My head, I can't see the words, Tom." His smile didn't disappear, but his eyes went flat. "Grace, don't be difficult. I'm trying to protect your father from the stress. You know how he gets about bills." "Not tonight," I said. He didn't argue. He just nodded, tucked the tablet back into his folder, and stood up. "Get some rest then, I'll handle it." I fell back into a black, drug-induced hole. When I woke up 4 hours later, the room was dark. The only light came from the monitor and the thin gap under the door. A woman was sitting in the guest chair. She wasn't my mother. It was Sarah, Tom's niece. She was 28, a nurse in the billing department at another hospital across town. She was the only one who didn't treat Uncle Tom like a prophet. She had a real wool blanket from home draped over her lap. She saw my eyes open and moved to the bed. She didn't ask me how I felt. She knew the chart. She just took my hand. Her palm was warm and dry. She started humming a low, quiet tune I recognized from our grandmother's house. "I saw him near the nurse's station," Sarah whispered after a few minutes. "Tom, he was using the guest Wi-Fi on his laptop. He looked twitchy, Grace. When he saw me, he closed the screen so fast he almost caught his tie in it. He wanted me to sign something," I said. Sarah's grip tightened just a fraction. "Don't sign anything he gives you. Not in here, not ever." I didn't know then that the handling it Tom promised had already happened. While I was under a morphine drip, he'd used a digital signature app to forge my name on a high-interest $38,000 personal loan, using my pristine credit and the hospital's IP address to make it look like a desperate patient was covering her own life-saving costs. 2 months later, I was back at my apartment. I was still pale, still moving slowly, but I was alive. I was sitting at my small kitchen table with a cup of herbal tea when I went through the mail. There was a thick envelope from a company called MeritSource Finance. I opened it, thinking it was a medical statement. It was a welcome to your loan packet, $38,000, first payment due in 15 days. The interest rate was 18%. I stared at my name on the top of the page. My hands began to shake so hard that the paper rattled like a dead leaf. The shaking didn't stop for 3 days. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that blue digital line on Uncle Tom's tablet. I saw the way the hospital lights reflected off his loafers. $38,000. It was a number that didn't feel like money, it felt like a sentence. I didn't call the bank first. I called my father. In the geography of our family, you didn't go to the authorities until you went to the architect. My father believed in the sanctity of the family name the way some men believe in the Bible. To him, an outside investigator was a failure of character. He told me to come over to the house. "Bring the papers, Grace. We'll look at them like adults." I drove over with the MeritSource packet on the passenger seat. My incision site still ached when I hit bumps in the road. When I walked into the kitchen, the smell of roasted chicken and floor wax hit me, the smell of a perfect home. My mother was at the stove, her back to me, stirring something in a copper pot. My father was sitting at the head of the oak table. He didn't stand up. He didn't ask how my recovery was going. He just tapped the wood in front of him. "Put it down," he said. I slid the packet over. I showed him the loan origination date. "Dad, look at the timestamp. October 14th, 10:22 p.m. I was in the ICU. I was on a morphine drip and oxygen. I couldn't even hold a pen, let alone sign an e-doc for 40 grand. He didn't look at the date. He didn't even flip to the second page. He pushed the papers back toward me with 2 fingers as if they were covered in grease. "I talked to Tom this morning," my father said. His voice was that low, vibrating bass he used when he was deciding what the truth was going to be. "He's devastated, Grace. He told me he tried to help you. He said you were panicked about your medical bills and your credit card debt, and you begged him to help you secure some liquidity." "I didn't," I said. My voice was thin. "I never asked him for a dime. I didn't even know I had debt until this arrived." "He says you signed it," my father continued, ignoring me. "He says he held the tablet for you. He says you were crying, thanking him for saving your future. And now he sees you're trying to claim forgery to get out of a debt you already spent." "Spent?" I shouted. The pain in my stomach flared. "Dad, look at the account. I don't have this money. It's not in my checking. It's not in my savings. I'm still driving a 10-year-old Corolla and eating ramen. Tom says you moved it to a private account, my father said. He finally looked at me and his eyes were full of a cold, hard disappointment. He thinks you have a problem, Grace. A spending problem, maybe something worse. He's seen it before with girls your age. You get a little success, you want the lifestyle, and when the bill comes due, you look for someone else to blame. In the corner, the sound of my mother's spoon hitting the side of the pot stopped. She didn't turn around. She just stood there, shoulders hunched, staring at the backsplash. "Mom," I asked, "you were there, you saw how out of it I was." She gripped the handle of the pot until her knuckles turned the color of the stove. "Your father and Tom are just trying to keep this family stable, Grace," she whispered to the wall. "Don't make it harder than it has to be." It was the family law in action. Uncle Tom was the provider, the savior, the man who kept the engine running. I was the daughter, the one who needed guidance, the one who was lucky to be included. If Tom said I was a liar, then the physics of the room dictated that I was a liar. "I'm calling the bank," I said, grabbing the papers. "And then I'm calling Tom." "You do that," my father said, standing up. He loomed over the table, his shadow stretching across the floor. "But you listen to me. If you drag your uncle's name through the mud because you were too irresponsible to handle your own finances, don't expect to find a seat at this table again. You want to be an adult. Fine, deal with the mess you made." I walked out of that house feeling like I was disappearing. I sat in my car in the driveway and dialed Tom's cell. He picked up on the second ring. "Grace," he said. He sounded cheerful, like he was calling to invite me to a ball game. "I heard you had a little chat with your dad." "How could you do this?" I asked. "How could you use my name to bail out your payroll? I know your business is struggling, Tom. Sarah told me things aren't as liquid as you pretend." The cheerfulness vanished instantly. The silence on the other end of the line was heavy, clinical. "Listen to me very carefully, you little leech," Tom said. His voice was a razor blade. "I have spent 20 years building the reputation of this family. I am the reason your father has an investment account. I am the reason your mother has that kitchen. If you say one word, one single word to the bank or the family that contradicts my version of events, I will ruin you. I'll tell the world you're a junkie. I'll tell them you stole from your own grandmother's estate. And Grace, they'll believe me. Because I'm the one who pays the bills and you're just the girl who couldn't even keep her own appendix from exploding." He hung up. I sat there in the dark, the Merit Source packet heavy in my lap. I looked up at the house. The kitchen light was warm and golden. I could see my mother setting the table for two. I didn't know yet that the email was already sent. Tom wasn't just threatening me, he was already moving to isolate the target. I didn't sleep that night. Every time I drifted off, I felt the phantom weight of Uncle Tom sitting on the edge of my hospital bed. By morning, I knew I had to act, so I took the loan packet and drove to the local branch of the bank listed on the forms. I expected a quiet office and a sympathetic manager. I got a glass-walled cubicle and a woman named Mrs. Gable who looked at me like I was a smudge on her windshield. "I didn't sign this," I told her, sliding the papers across her desk. "I was incapacitated. I have medical records to prove I was sedated when this electronic signature was captured." Mrs. Gable didn't look at the records. She tapped a rhythm on her keyboard and squinted at the screen. "Miss Miller, this loan was co-signed and verified by a secondary contact, a Thomas Miller. He's listed as your uncle and a business associate." "He's not a business associate," I said, my voice rising. "He's the one who forged it. He used your guest portal or the hospital Wi-Fi. You need to flag this as fraud." Mrs. Gable stopped tapping. "If I flag this as fraud, an internal investigation begins immediately. All parties, including the secondary contact, will be notified and interviewed." "Are you prepared to file a formal police report against your relative?" "Yes," I said. My heart was thumping against my ribs. "I am." Very well, I'll place a temporary freeze on the dispute. You'll receive a confirmation call. I walked out feeling a tiny spark of hope. It was the first time I'd pushed back against the family law. I went to work at the design firm, trying to focus on hex codes and margin alignments, but my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Tom didn't call me. He went for the jugular. By 4:00 p.m., my father had called me 17 times. When I finally answered, he didn't even say hello. "What have you done?" he roared. I could hear the sound of a heavy door slamming in the background. "Tom just got a call from a fraud investigator. He's at the house right now, Grace. Your mother is in tears. Tom is talking about legal liability and how this could tank his business credit because his name is attached to your mess." "It's his mess, Dad. He stole the money. He's calling a meeting," my father said, his voice dropping into a deadly, quiet register. "Tonight, 7:00 p.m. Don't bother coming. He's going to explain to the family what's really been going on with you." "I should be there. You're the one who betrayed this family's trust," he cut me off. "Stay away, Grace, for your own sake." I didn't stay away. I drove to my parents' house at 7:30 p.m., but when I pulled into the driveway, I saw 4 other cars. My aunt's, my cousin's, and Tom's black SUV. The house was glowing, every light on, looking like a stage. I walked up to the front door and turned the knob. It was locked. My father never locked the front door before 10:00 p.m. Never. I knocked. Then I pounded. The curtain in the dining room flicked. I saw my Aunt Sheila look out, then quickly look away, her face tight with pity and disgust. 10 minutes later, the door opened. My father stood there. He didn't let me in. He stepped out onto the porch and pulled the door shut behind him, holding the brass handle like a weapon. "Go home, Grace," he said. "Dad, let me talk to them. Let me show them the timestamps." "They've seen enough," he said. "Tom showed us the other account, the one where you moved the loan money. He showed us the wire transfers to those online betting sites. He told us about the calls he's been taking from your friends looking for repayment." My jaw dropped. "He made that up. He's lying. He's using his business accounts to mask where the money went." "Enough," my father screamed. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a ring of keys. He unclipped 2 silver ones and dropped them at my feet. They hit the wooden porch with a sharp clink. "Those are the keys to this house. You don't live here and you aren't welcome here. Not until you go to rehab, apologize to your uncle, and figure out how to pay him back for the damage you've done to his reputation." "Dad, please." "You're dead to me, Grace. Until you're clean, you don't have a father." He turned and went back inside. I heard the deadbolt slide home. I stood on the porch in the dark. I could hear laughter from inside, the booming, confident laugh of Uncle Tom. He was in there, eating the cake my mother had surely made, spinning a story where I was a ghost, a junkie, a leech. I walked back to my car, my legs feeling like lead. When I got to my apartment, there was a white slip of paper tucked into the door frame. It was from my landlord. My lease renewal had been declined. The note was brief. "Recent credit check shows significant derogatory marks and high debt-to-income ratio. We require a tenant with a score of 650 or higher. Please vacate by the 30th. I leaned my head against the door. I had 3 weeks to find a home with a credit score that Tom had just burned to the ground. But as I reached for my phone to call Sarah, I saw a notification I'd missed. A bank alert. A new joint checking account had been opened in my name 3 hours ago. Tom wasn't just hiding, he was still digging. The motel was called the Sunset Rest, but there was nothing restful about the neon sign that hummed outside my window or the smell of stale cigarettes that had seeped into the very drywall. I had 3 suitcases, a laptop, and the yellow folder that was slowly becoming my only identity. I was working double shifts at the design firm now. I'd go in at 7:00 a.m., do my regular work, and then stay until 10:00 p.m. doing freelance data entry for a medical supply company. My eyes felt like they were full of sand. Every cent I earned that wasn't for rent or gas went into a separate account. I wasn't paying the loan, I was saving for the fight. While I was eating a $3 sandwich in the motel parking lot, I saw a post on my mother's Facebook. It was a photo of the family on the deck of a massive cruise ship. My father was holding a tropical drink, his arm around Uncle Tom. The caption read, "Celebrating Tom's big business expansion. So blessed to have family who looks out for one another." The expansion was my $38,000. They were drinking my credit score on the high seas while I was checking the deadbolt on a 12-square-foot room every 20 minutes. I felt erased. I wasn't a daughter or a niece anymore. I was a ghost story they told to make themselves feel more righteous. On Tuesday night, there was a knock at my door. I froze, my hand going to the heavy glass ashtray on the nightstand. "Grace, it's Sarah." I opened the door. Sarah was standing there in her nursing scrubs, looking exhausted. She was holding 2 steaming cardboard cups and a thick accordion folder. "I had to go to 3 different motels before I found your car," she said, stepping inside. She didn't comment on the peeling wallpaper or the damp carpet. She just set the coffees down and opened the folder. "I brought rental listings. These are private landlords, friends of mine. They don't run credit checks if I vouch for the tenant." "Sarah, you don't have to do this," I whispered. She looked me dead in the eye, her face hard and cert. "I don't care what they say at the dinner table, Grace. I know you. I've known you since we were 5. You don't have a spending problem. You have a Tom problem, and I'm going to help you solve it." We sat on the edge of the stiff mattress, the steam from the coffee the only warmth in the room. For an hour, I wasn't a leech. I was just Grace. "I brought something else," she said, reaching into the bottom of her bag. She pulled out a messy stack of papers. "When we moved your boxes out of your apartment, this fell out of your medical binder. You missed it." It was a copy of my anesthesia chart from the hospital. I looked at the line graphs. On October 14th, from 8:00 p.m. until nearly midnight, my sedation levels were at a 10. I was effectively unconscious. "The loan was signed at 10:22 p.m., I said, my voice finally steady. "Exactly," Sarah said. "You weren't just groggy, Grace. You were medically incapable of consenting to a stick of gum, let alone a $40,000 debt." I looked at the chart. The small light in the room felt a little brighter. The lie didn't stay within the walls of my father's house. It moved through our town like a virus, invisible but changing the air in every room I entered. By July, the leech narrative had been polished into a community fact. I found out how far it had reached when I applied for a senior designer role at a local firm run by a longtime family friend, Mr. Henderson. I'd known him since I was 10. He used to give me drawing pads and charcoal pencils for my birthday. I walked into the interview with a portfolio I'd spent 3 years building, only to find him standing behind his desk, not offering a seat. "Grace," he said, his voice heavy with a forced kind of pity. "I spoke with your father and Tom last week. They told me about the situation, the financial instability, the debt." "Mr. Henderson, that's not the whole story," I started, my heart sinking. He held up a hand. "I'm a businessman, Grace. I can't have someone with financial liability issues handling client accounts. It's a risk I can't take. Your father is worried about you. Maybe you should focus on your recovery before you focus on a career." He didn't even look at my portfolio. I walked out into the humid July afternoon, the weight of the lie pressing down on my chest. It wasn't just my family anymore, it was my future. The true test came 2 weeks later. My grandmother had passed away in May, and her estate was finally being settled. She left me a hand-carved cedar chest, a family heirloom that had been in her bedroom for 60 years. I was told to come to the annual family summer barbecue at my parents' house to retrieve it. I didn't want to go, but that chest was the only thing I had left of her. I put on a clean linen shirt, tucked my folder into my bag, and drove to the house I was no longer allowed to enter. I walked onto the back patio, and the shift in the atmosphere was immediate. The music, some upbeat country song Tom liked, didn't stop, but the volume of the conversation plummeted. It was like a physical wall had been erected at the edge of the decking. My Aunt Sheila and my cousin Becky were sitting in the wicker chairs near the grill. As I approached, they didn't say hello. They didn't even look up. They physically turned their chairs 45 degrees away from me, focusing intently on their paper plates. My mother was standing by the patio table, which was laden with potato salad and fruit trays. When she saw me, her hand flew to her neck. She didn't move toward me. Instead, she reached down, grabbed her leather purse from the table, and pulled it onto her lap, clutching it with both hands as if she expected me to snatch it and run. Nobody offered me a drink. Nobody asked how I was doing. Uncle Tom was standing by the cooler, a beer in his hand, looking like the king of the world in a pristine white polo shirt. He waited until there was a lull in the music, then raised his bottle toward me. "Better check your wallets, everyone," he called out, his voice booming over the yard. "The specialist is here. Make sure your credit cards are tucked away tight." A ripple of laughter went through the crowd, the kind of cruel, compliant laughter of people who want to stay on the good side of the man buying the beer. My father chuckled, shaking his head as he flipped a burger. "Very funny, Tom," my father said, but his eyes were hard when they landed on me. "The chest is in the garage, Grace. Take it and go. We have guests." I felt the heat rising in my face, that old familiar shame that Tom had spent 2 years cultivating. I looked around the yard at the people who had watched me grow up, now looking at me like I was a common thief. But then I saw Sarah. She was standing by the back door holding a tray of brownies. Our eyes met. She didn't laugh. She didn't look away. She slowly shook her head no, a tiny, private signal that she wasn't buying the performance. I walked toward the garage, my head held high, but my hands were shaking. I grabbed the handle of the cedar chest, its weight a grounding force. As I pulled it toward my car, I saw Tom watching me from the porch, a smirk of pure triumph on his face. He thought he'd won. He thought the social contagion had finished me off. But as I pulled out of the driveway, my phone buzzed in the cup holder. It was a text from Sarah. "He's sloppy, Grace. He just told Aunt Sheila he's investing in a new fleet of trucks next month. With what money? Meet me tonight." I found something in the logs. I didn't go back to the motel. I drove straight to Sarah's house, the cedar chest heavy in my trunk, a physical reminder of the life they were trying to lock me out of. Sarah was waiting on her porch, her nursing scrubs replaced by a t-shirt and jeans, a thick manila folder tucked under her arm. "He's not just arrogant, Grace," she said as she let me in. "He's lazy. He thinks because he's Uncle Tom, nobody will ever look at the fine print." We sat on her living room floor, the space cluttered with highlighters, post-it notes, and a cold pepperoni pizza we'd ordered from the place down the street. It was the first time in 2 years I felt like I was allowed to take up space. We weren't just two cousins talking, we were two investigators dismantling a crime. Sarah spread out the printouts. "I didn't steal these," she clarified, her voice professional and sharp. "I work in billing, not records, but I know the system." I found the IP address associated with the digital signature on your loan. It didn't come from your home, and it didn't come from Tom's office. She pointed to a string of numbers highlighted in yellow. "This IP belongs to the hospital's guest Wi-Fi. It's a public-facing portal. And here," she slid another paper over, "is the visitor log I told you about." "How did you get this?" I asked, looking at the official hospital header. "I didn't," she smiled, a small, triumphant thing. "You did." Or you will. Under the Patient Privacy Act, you have the right to request a full audit of who accessed your room and when. I just told the records clerk you were coming. You're going down to medical records on the 3rd floor tomorrow morning. By law, they have to give you the visitor check-in logs and your anesthesia timestamps. They can't refuse a patient's request for their own data. I looked at the highlighted sections. Tom signed into the visitor kiosk at 10:15 p.m. on October 14th. The loan was signed at 10:22 p.m. from the hospital Wi-Fi. The signature happened while he was standing 3 feet from your bed, Sarah said. She reached out and squeezed my hand. He didn't even wait for the morphine to wear off. He did it while you were literally unable to speak. For a moment, the room was silent. The weight of the betrayal felt different now, less like a heavy fog and more like a cold, hard stone I could finally pick up and throw. "Why did you do this, Sarah?" I asked. "You're risking a lot. Tom's your uncle, too. If the family finds out you helped me." I watched my dad lose his retirement because he trusted Tom with an investment, she said, her voice dropping. I watched my mom apologize for Tom's temper for 20 years. The family law only works if everyone keeps quiet. I'm tired of being quiet, Grace, and you've been quiet long enough. We spent the next 3 hours mapping it out. Sarah showed me how to request the specific packet of care that would include the technical metadata. We ate the cold pizza, and for the first time in 2 years, I actually laughed. It wasn't a loud laugh, but it was real. It was the sound of a person realizing they weren't crazy. "Go to the hospital at 9:00 a.m., Sarah said as I stood up to leave. "Get the logs, then go straight to the precinct. Don't call your dad, don't call your mom, just go." I walked to my car, the night air feeling cooler, cleaner. I hadn't even checked my phone in hours. When I finally looked, I saw a notification from my bank app. Another insufficient funds alert on the joint account Tom had opened in my name. He was still spending. He was still digging the hole, confident that I was too buried to ever climb out. I didn't feel the usual panic. I just felt a quiet, simmering resolve. He was right about one thing: I was a leech. But I wasn't sucking the life out of the family. I was the one who was going to drain the poison out of the system. I didn't wait for the sun to come up. I was sitting in the hospital parking lot at 7:45 a.m., watching the shift change, clutching a lukewarm coffee and the specific list of form numbers Sarah had written down. My stomach was in knots, but for the first time in 2 years, it wasn't the sick, hollow feeling of being a victim. It was the vibrating hum of a hunter. The medical records office on the 3rd floor was small and smelled intensely of ozone and old paper. A woman with silver-rimmed glasses looked up from a stack of files. "I need my full care packet from my October stay," I said, sliding my ID across the counter. "I need the technical metadata, specifically the visitor check-in logs and the anesthesia timestamp charts." She started to shake her head. "Those logs are internal. Under the Patient Privacy Act and the 21st Century Cures Act, I have a legal right to immediate access to my electronic health records and all associated administrative data regarding my stay," I said, repeating Sarah's coached lines perfectly. "If there's a delay, I'm happy to wait here while you call the hospital's legal compliance officer." She stopped. She looked at me, really looked at me, and then she looked at the computer. 10 minutes later, the printer started to chug. I walked out of the hospital with 20 pages of thermal paper. I didn't even make it to the car before I started reading. There it was. October 14th, 10:15 p.m. Visitor Thomas Miller signs in at kiosk 2. 10:18 p.m. Visitor Thomas Miller enters ICU Wing B10. 22 p.m. Merit source loan application submitted via IP 172.16.2541, hospital guest Wi-Fi. 10:22 p.m. Patient Grace Miller vitals, heart rate 58, SpO2 96%, sedation level 10. Non-responsive. The leverage wasn't just a theory anymore. It was a mathematical certainty. I drove straight to the 4th precinct. I sat in a plastic chair in the lobby for 2 hours before a Detective Miller, no relation luckily, called me back. He was a tired-looking man with a coffee stain on his tie, but when I spread the papers out on his desk, his posture changed. "You're saying your uncle took out a loan while you were in a coma?" he asked, leaning in. "I wasn't in a coma, detective. I was medically sedated for post-surgical sepsis. But yes, here are the logs, here are the timestamps. And here," I pulled out a printout of my bank records Sarah had helped me analyze, "is the joint account he opened in my name 3 days later. He used the $38,000 from the loan to fund this account, then immediately wired $37,500 to Miller Trucking and Logistics." The detective whistled low. "He didn't even try to hide the trail. He just assumed you'd never look." "He assumed my family would keep me too ashamed to look," I said. He spent the next hour typing. He made copies of everything. He even pulled up the IP address records for the joint account setup. "This pinged from a residential address," he said, turning the monitor toward me. "Recognize it? It was my father's house. Tom had used my parents' Wi-Fi to create the fraudulent account while I was still recovering in my bedroom upstairs." "Is this enough?" I asked. "Miss Miller, this isn't just enough. This is a slam dunk," Detective Miller said. He looked at me with a grim sort of respect. "We're looking at felony identity theft, wire fraud, and grand larceny. I'm going to get the warrants for the business accounts. We'll track exactly where that money went. How long? A few days for the subpoenas to clear. I'll have the finalized report by the end of the week." "Wait," I said as he stood up. "Can you do me a favor when the report is ready? Can you mail it to me in a plain yellow envelope? And don't contact him yet. Don't let him know you're coming." The detective paused. He looked at my face, the face of the girl who had been called a leech for 700 days. He nodded slowly. "We usually move as soon as the warrant is signed, but for a case this clean, I think we can give it until Monday. You have something planned." "I have a dinner to attend," I said. I walked out of the precinct and felt the sun on my face. The leverage was confirmed. The trap was set. Now, all I had to do was wait for the one day of the year when the whole family was required to sit in one room and pretend to love each other. The week of Thanksgiving felt like the slow climb of a roller coaster, the clicking sound of the gears holding the weight before the drop. My father sent a text on Monday morning. It was the first time he'd messaged me in weeks, and it was as clinical as a subpoena. "Dinner is at 4. Come. Keep your head down, don't ask for money, and maybe Tom will forgive you for the trouble you've caused. Wear something nice. Your mother is making a turkey. Maybe Tom will forgive you." The words should have stung, but they just felt hollow, like a script from a movie I'd already seen too many times. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I was busy checking the mailbox. On Tuesday, it arrived. A thick, plain yellow envelope with no return address, just as I'd requested. I took it to my desk in the motel room and sat under the flickering fluorescent light. I didn't just read it, I memorized it. Detective Miller hadn't held back. The report was 32 pages of absolute ruin. It didn't just have the hospital logs and the anesthesia charts. It had the bank's internal memo from the day Tom called to verify the debt. It had the wire transfer records showing $37,500 moving from the fraudulent joint account directly into Miller Trucking payroll expense. But the most damning part was the last page. The detective had included a screenshot of the login metadata for the joint account. It had been accessed 4 times from an IP address registered to my father's home. The last login was 3 days ago. Tom was still checking to see if there was any credit left to squeeze out of my name. He wasn't just a thief. He was a predator who had turned my parents' house into his hunting ground. On Wednesday, I went to a boutique downtown. I didn't look at the clearance rack. I bought a dress the color of deep sea water, dark, elegant, and sharp. I spent 2 hours on my hair and makeup on Thursday morning. I wanted to look like the woman they claimed I was, a girl who had spent $38,000 on a reckless lifestyle. If I was going to be the villain in their story, I was going to be the most expensive-looking villain they'd ever seen. I drove to my parents' house with the yellow envelope tucked into a leather tote bag. As I pulled onto the street, I saw the familiar line of cars. My Aunt Sheila's station wagon, my cousin's SUVs. And right at the front, taking up the prime spot in the driveway, was Tom's black Mercedes. I parked 3 houses down on the street. I didn't want to be blocked in. I wanted a clear path to the exit. As I walked up the driveway, I saw my father through the front window. He was laughing, a glass of scotch in his hand, leaning against the mantel. Tom was standing next to him, gesturing wildly, likely telling another story about his liquidity and his vision. I stood on the porch for a long moment, the cool November air stinging my cheeks. I could hear the muffled sound of 14 people talking at once, the sound of a family system that had decided I was the rot in the floorboards. I didn't knock. I used the key I still had. The one my father hadn't realized was a duplicate of the ones he'd made me drop on the porch months ago. I stepped into the hallway. The smell of sage and roasting fat hit me. It was the smell of every childhood memory I had, now soured by the weight of the paper in my bag. "Grace!" My mother was standing in the kitchen doorway, a dish towel in her hands. She looked at my dress, my hair, the way I was standing. She looked like she wanted to run to me and like she wanted to scream at me to leave before the peace was broken. "I'm here for dinner, Mom," I said. My voice was calm, level, and entirely cold. "Is the turkey ready?" "Grace is here." My father called out from the living room. His voice carried that warning tone, the one that said behave or else. I walked into the living room. Tom turned around, a wide, predatory smile stretching across his face. "Well, look at that," Tom said, his eyes scanning my dress. "Looks like the leech found some more blood to suck. That's a nice outfit, Grace. Did you use your rent money for that, or did you find another uncle to rob?" The room went silent. My cousins looked at their shoes. My father just took a sip of his scotch. "I'm just glad you could join us, Tom," I said, smiling back. It was the first time I'd smiled at him in 2 years. "I think today is going to be a day we all remember." I didn't wait for him to respond. I walked straight to the dining table and took my seat, the one at the very end, near the kitchen door. The folding chair. I placed my bag on the floor and felt the edge of the yellow envelope. The countdown was over. The air in the dining room was thick with the smell of rosemary, and the heavy, humid heat of 14 people crammed into a space built for 8. It was the public arena, the place where my family's myths were reinforced every year with the same silver and the same lies. My father stood at the head of the table, carving the turkey with a rhythmic, aggressive precision. To his right sat Uncle Tom, chest puffed out, already halfway through his second glass of red wine. My mother moved back and forth from the kitchen, her face a mask of frantic politeness, ensuring everyone had enough gravy, enough bread, enough of the illusion. "A toast," my father said, tapping his glass with the carving knife. The room went quiet save for the sound of a distant siren somewhere in the neighborhood. To family, to Tom for a banner year in the business, and to the rest of us for sticking together even when some of us make it difficult. He looked pointedly at me, sitting on my folding chair at the far end. "Here, here," Tom barked, raising his glass. He leaned back, his chair creaking under his weight. "And let's not forget the lesson of the year. Some people build and some people just consume. It's hard work being the one everyone leans on, but I'd rather be the pillar than the parasite. He paused, looking around the room for the laugh he knew was coming. She's just a family leech, he said, nodding toward me. But hey, she looks good today. I guess $40,000 buys a lot of skincare. The table erupted. My Aunt Sheila giggled into her napkin. My cousins exchanged smirks. It was the same laughter I'd heard for 2 years, the sound of people who found it easier to believe a lie than to risk their own comfort. I didn't flinch. I didn't cry. I reached down into my bag and pulled out the thick yellow envelope. I didn't say a word. I just stood up, walked the length of the table, and set it directly next to the turkey platter. "What's this, Grace?" my father asked, his knife pausing midair. "If this is another request for a loan, it's a gift, Dad," I said. My voice was low and steady. "It's the truth. I thought it was time we all read the same book." Tom's smile didn't just fade, it curdled. He reached for the envelope, his fingers twitching, but my father was faster. He pulled out the first page, the hospital visitor log. The silence that followed was different than the one before. This was the silence of a structure beginning to groan under too much weight. "Grace, what is this?" my father whispered, his eyes scanning the technical columns. "October 14th, you were in the ICU. Read the kiosk sign-in, Dad," I said, "and look at the timestamp on the loan application on page 4. My father's brother, Uncle Bill, the oldest of the siblings and a man who had spent 40 years in civil service, reached over and took the second page. Bill was a man of few words, the kind who noticed everything and said nothing. He read the bank transfer records, his brow furrowing. "Tom," Bill said, his voice like gravel. "This says $37,000 went into your payroll account on the 15th, wired from a joint account with Grace's name on it." An account opened from Richard's home IP address. "It's a mistake," Tom snapped, his face turning a dark, mottled purple. "She gave me permission. She was panicked about her bills. She told me to handle it. I was doing her a favor. The records say I was at a sedation level of 10, Tom," I said, my voice cutting through his panic. "I couldn't give you permission to change the TV channel, let alone sign a felony loan." "You're lying." Tom roared, pushing his chair back so hard it hit the sideboard with a crash. A crystal bowl rattled and fell, shattering on the floor. "You're trying to frame me because you're a failure. Richard, tell her she's delusional." My father looked from the papers to Tom, then back to the papers. For the first time in my life, I saw him look small. The architect was realizing he'd built his house on a swamp. "The police report is finalized, Tom," I said. "Detective Miller at the 4th Precinct has the warrants for the business records. He knows about the other accounts, too, the ones you opened using Dad's Wi-Fi." "I did it for the family," Tom screamed, his hands shaking as he gripped the edge of the table. "The business was hit hard by the strikes. I was going to pay it back. I was protecting all of you. Richard, if I went under, your investment went under. I did it for you." The room went cold. That was the second reveal, the one that broke the system. Tom hadn't just stolen from me, he had used my identity as a shield to protect the money he'd already lost for my father. Uncle Bill stood up. He didn't look at Tom. He didn't look at my father. He looked at me, and for the first time in a decade, he saw me. He picked up his napkin, folded it neatly, and placed it on top of his untouched plate of food. "You stole from a sick girl," Bill said to Tom. "You used her name while she was dying in a bed because you were too proud to admit you failed." Bill turned and walked toward the hallway. "Sheila, get your coat. We're leaving." "Bill, wait," my father started, but Bill didn't stop. The front door opened and closed, a final, heavy thud. Tom was hyperventilating now, his chest heaving. "It wasn't like that. Richard, she's manipulating the data. She's a designer. She knows how to fake documents." "The police don't fake warrants, Tom," I said. My mother was still standing by the kitchen door, clutching her purse. She looked at the shattered crystal on the floor, then at Tom, then at me. She did something she hadn't done in 26 years. She walked over to me, bypassed my father, and put her hand on my shoulder. It was a small gesture, but it felt like an earthquake. "I kept the tea towels you gave me for Christmas," she whispered, her voice trembling. "The ones everyone laughed at. I kept them because they were the only thing in this house that felt real." I looked at my father. He was staring at the yellow envelope like it was a bomb. "Grace," he started, his voice cracking. "Don't," I said. "The mashed potatoes are getting cold. You should probably finish carving." I picked up my bag. I didn't need the envelope anymore. I'd left the truth on the table, right next to the turkey. As I walked out the front door, the blue and red lights of a patrol car were already turning onto our street, reflecting off the windows of the neighbors' houses. I didn't stay to watch them lead him out in his Italian loafers. I had a drive to make. The drive from my parents' house to the precinct was only 12 minutes, but I took the long way. I drove past the hospital where this had all started. I drove past the apartment complex that had turned me away because of a number on a screen. I watched the autumn leaves swirl in my headlights, and for the first time in 2 years, the air inside my car didn't feel heavy. By the time I reached the police station, the paperwork was already in motion. Detective Miller met me in the lobby. He didn't say much. He just handed me a small card with a case number on it and told me they'd be in touch for a formal statement in the morning. I didn't need to stay. The system I had built, the one made of timestamps, logs, and truth, was now running on its own. The fallout was clinical and swift. Tom was indicted 3 weeks later on multiple counts of identity theft and wire fraud. His liquidity turned out to be a mountain of debt, and his trucking business folded within the month. Without his financial leadership, the extended family scrambled. Aunt Sheila stopped hosting the Sunday brunches. The group chat, once buzzing with jokes about my lifestyle, went silent. My father reached out first. He left a voicemail 3 days after Thanksgiving. His voice was thick, sounding older than I remembered. "Grace," he said, the sound of a television humming in the background. "We need to talk about this privately. We can fix this without the lawyers. Just call your mother." I didn't call. I deleted the message. Then I deleted the next 3. He didn't want to fix the harm. He wanted to fix the reputation. He wanted to return to a world where the family law was the only law, where Uncle Tom was a pillar and I was a convenient scapegoat. But that world had burned down next to the turkey platter, and I wasn't interested in sifting through the ash. I spent the next 6 months working. I moved out of the Sunset Rest Motel and into a small studio apartment on the north side of the city. It has high ceilings, a brick wall, and a balcony that looks out over the park. There isn't much furniture, just a desk, a bed, and the cedar chest my grandmother left me. My credit was restored after a long, grueling process with the bank's fraud department. The $38,000 debt vanished, replaced by a letter of apology that I kept in the same yellow folder, right at the back. It's Thanksgiving again today. It's quiet here. The only sound is the kettle whistling and the wind brushing against the glass of the balcony door. Sarah is coming over in an hour. She's bringing the mashed potatoes, the real kind, with enough butter to make my father complain. We're not hosting 14 people. We're hosting 2. I'm standing on the balcony now, holding a cup of hot coffee. The city lights are starting to blink on, tiny sparks of gold against the darkening blue of the sky. No one is asking me for money. No one is calling me a leech. No one is telling me who I have to be to earn a seat at the table. In the corner of my living room, the cedar chest sits under the window. I've polished the wood until it glows. It's the only thing I took from that house, and it's the only thing I needed. It's sturdy, it's mine, and it doesn't have a price tag. If your family demanded you apologize to the person who robbed you just to keep the peace, would you have stayed quiet? Would you have kept passing the potatoes while they ate your future? Or would you have brought the envelope to dinner? Drop a comment below and tell me your story. I'm reading every single one. Next time, I'll tell you about a mother who tried to cancel her daughter's wedding behind her back and how 200 strangers showed up to take her place.